There will be no 2026 WNBA season. 2026 WNBA season is cooked. Time to face reality, guys. It is time to face reality.
The WNBA is on top of the world. Arenas are sold out. TV ratings are shattering records. Merchandise is flying off the shelves. For the first time in its 25-year history, the league isn't just surviving, it's a cultural phenomenon. And it's all thanks to the arrival of a single generational talent, Caitlin Clark. This is the moment the league has been fighting for, the golden age they dreamed of. But behind the bright lights and the roaring crowds, a doomsday clock is ticking down. A catastrophic series of events is converging, threatening to burn the entire league to the ground and cancel the 2026 season entirely. This isn't just a simple contract dispute. This is a civil war, a battle for the soul of the WNBA, fought on 3 different fronts. First, it's an economic war over how to divide a rapidly growing financial empire. Second, it's a political war, a ruthless power struggle between the league's old guard and a new generation of empowered player entrepreneurs. And finally, it's a deeply personal war, a bitter public feud between the league's most powerful player and its commissioner that has made a peaceful resolution almost impossible. At the center of this hurricane is Caitlin Clark. She is the unwilling catalyst and the ultimate prize. Her talent created the new wealth everyone is fighting over, and now her career is being used as a bargaining chip in a high-stakes game that could leave her with no league to play in. So how did the WNBA's greatest moment of triumph lead it to the absolute brink of a self-inflicted collapse? And more importantly, who really stands to benefit if the league goes dark? To understand how deep this crisis goes, you have to follow the money. This entire conflict started when the WNBA Players Association officially opted out of their current contract, known as the Collective Bargaining Agreement, or CBA. They didn't do this just to get a raise. They did it to fundamentally blow up the entire economic model of the league. For years, players have been treated like employees, receiving fixed, predictable salary increases that have no connection to how well the league is actually doing. Under the old deal, player salaries went up by a flat 3% each year, while the league's popularity and revenue were exploding by double and triple digits. Players were getting just 9% of the total revenue they were generating. They saw the sold-out arenas, the massive new TV deals, and the tidal wave of new fans, and they realized they were being left behind. So they came to the negotiating table with a revolutionary demand. They no longer want to be employees, they want to be partners. They are demanding a system just like the one NBA players have, where they receive a direct percentage of what's called basketball-related income. This wouldn't just be money from big league-wide media deals. It would include everything. Ticket sales from every game, local team sponsorships, everything. It's a philosophical shift. The players see themselves as the engine of the business, the ones creating all this new value, and they believe the financial structure should reflect that partnership. They're no longer asking for a bigger slice of the pie. They're demanding to be co-owners of the bakery. The league's response? A hard no. The owners countered with an offer that on the surface looked generous. They proposed significant raises to the salary cap and a new revenue-sharing model. But when the players looked at the fine print, they saw it was the same old system in a shiny new package. The salary increases were still fixed, not tied to growth, and the so-called revenue sharing was a maze of loopholes. It would only kick in if the league hit certain ambitious revenue targets. It would only include money from the league's central office, not the millions generated by individual teams. And in the most insulting clause of all, it would only be paid out after the league paid itself back for its own expenses. The Players Association called it what it was, a piece of the pie. This is where the negotiation completely broke down. The owners are trying to maintain control and protect their investments. They see the Caitlin Clark effect as a potential bubble, and they're hedging their bets. The players, on the other hand, see this as their one chance to secure their future, and are ready to go all in. With neither side willing to budge on this fundamental principle, the talks turned toxic. The players' legal counsel, Aaron D. Drake, went public, declaring that a deal was not going to happen by the deadline and accusing the league of dragging its feet. The league fired back with a stunning public statement, accusing the Players Association of spreading public misinformation. When two sides in a negotiation start publicly calling each other liars, the chances of a good faith deal evaporate. And with the trust completely gone, a simple extension to keep the league running became an impossibility. But this financial battle was just the beginning. The players had a secret weapon, a shadow government they had been building for years, ready to be deployed at this exact moment. As the negotiations with the WNBA were falling apart, something else was rising. A new professional women's basketball league called Unrivaled, a 3-on-3 league designed to be played during the WNBA offseason. This wasn't some small, independent project, it was a corporate juggernaut in the making. And the co-founders, none other than Breanna Stewart and Napheesa Collier, two of the most powerful players in the WNBA and key leaders of the very players' association that was negotiating against the league. If you want to understand the real power dynamic at play here, you have to follow the money, and the money trail for Unrivaled is staggering. This is not a side hustle, it's a venture-backed corporation with a valuation of $340 million. They've raised tens of millions of dollars from a who's who of sports and business titans. We're talking about Serena Williams, NBA stars like Carmelo Anthony and Steve Nash, soccer icons like Megan Rapinoe and Alex Morgan, and most importantly, serious corporate players like former ESPN president John Skipper and former Turner president David Levy. These are not people who invest in passion projects, they invest for a return. Unrivaled offers players things the WNBA can't or won't. The average salary in its first season was around $220,000, nearly matching the WNBA's Supermax salary, and it came with something even more valuable, equity. Every player is a part owner of the league. For the first time, WNBA players had a high-paying domestic alternative. They no longer had to fly overseas to Russia or China to make a living in the off-season. They had a legitimate, powerful, and well-funded league right here at home, and that gave them the ultimate leverage in the CBA negotiations. It became their nuclear option. For the first time in history, the players could afford a work stoppage. They could walk away from the WNBA negotiating table, knowing they had another high-paying job to go to. But this is where the situation gets incredibly messy. Think about the conflict of interest. Napheesa Collier, a leader of the WNBA, is sitting at the negotiating table, supposedly fighting for the best possible deal for all WNBA players. But she is also the co-founder and co-owner of a $340 million company whose success is directly tied to the WNBA's failure. A canceled 2026 WNBA season isn't a problem for Unrivaled, it's a business opportunity. It would eliminate their #1 competitor for talent, for media attention, and for sponsorship dollars. It would make Unrivaled the only major women's pro basketball league operating in the United States. So the question becomes unavoidable. Is Napheesa Collier negotiating for the future of the WNBA or for the future of her own company? She now has a fiduciary duty, not just to her fellow players, but to her powerful investors who are expecting a massive return on their investment. And that conflict has turned a standard business negotiation into something far more personal and far more dangerous. Just when it seemed like the corporate and financial stakes couldn't get any higher, the entire conflict detonated into a deeply personal and public feud. The battle stopped being about money and started being about respect, and it was all because of a calculated strategic move by Napheesa Collier. During her end-of-season media availability, instead of giving standard answers, she came with a prepared statement and launched a direct personal attack on the WNBA's commissioner, Cathy Engelbert. Collier detailed a private conversation she claimed to have had with the commissioner, and the allegations were explosive. According to Collier, when she pressed Engelbert on why players were getting such a small piece of the new media rights deals, the commissioner's response was shocking. Collier alleged that Engelbert told her that players should be on their knees thanking their lucky stars for the deal she got them. The image was demeaning, painting the players not as partners, but as ungrateful subjects who should be thankful for whatever scraps they were given. But Collier wasn't done. She then brought up Caitlin Clark. She claimed she asked the commissioner how the league planned to fix the fact that a player like Clark, who was generating hundreds of millions of dollars in new revenue, was making a rookie salary of less than $80,000. According to Collier, Engelbert's response was even more dismissive. She allegedly said that Caitlin Clark should be grateful for the WNBA, because without the league's platform, she wouldn't be making her reported $16 million in off-court endorsement deals. The implication was clear. The league felt it was entitled to a cut of Clark's success, and that the platform it provided was a form of payment in itself. The league office was blindsided. Engelbert quickly released a statement saying she was disheartened by how Collier had characterized their private conversation and denied the claims. But the damage was done. It was no longer Collier's word against the commissioners. The story was out, and it was toxic. The alleged comments spread like wildfire, framing the league's leadership as arrogant, dismissive, and completely out of touch. Even the NBA commissioner, Adam Silver, had to step in, admitting publicly that the situation had become too personal. This was a masterstroke of negotiation warfare by Collier. In one move, she transformed a complex financial dispute into a simple, emotionally powerful story of disrespect. It was no longer about salary caps and revenue splits. It was about dignity. She galvanized the players, won the sympathy of the public, and painted the commissioner into a corner. How could the players ever accept a deal brokered by a leader who allegedly held them in such low regard? The negotiation was no longer a business transaction. It was a war of wills, and at the heart of that war was the one person who had nothing to do with starting it. Caitlin Clark is the central paradox of this entire crisis. She is the most powerful force in the league, and at the same time, the most vulnerable pawn. Her arrival was like a meteor strike, single-handedly transforming the WNBA's economic landscape. They call it the Caitlin Clark effect, but it's more like the Caitlin Clark economy. Teams that used to play in half-empty arenas were suddenly moving their games against her Indiana Fever to massive NBA stadiums just to handle the demand for tickets. Last season, 41 of her team's 44 games were broadcast on national television, an unprecedented number. Her coach even called her Taylor Swift 2.0, and it wasn't an exaggeration. She is the golden goose, the engine driving the very revenue boom that everyone is now fighting over. But that fame has come at a brutal cost. From the moment she stepped onto a WNBA court, she has been a target. The physical play against her has been relentless, and at times dangerous. She's been cheap-shotted, knocked to the floor, and subjected to a level of aggression that many, including her former college coach, believe crosses the line from tough defense into intentional targeting. NBA star Paul George even admitted that it was natural for veteran players to be offended by her instant stardom and to feel like she needed to be physically tested to earn it. The league, for its part, has largely downplayed the issue, with Commissioner Engelbert brushing it off by saying the game is physical and that everybody's getting bumped. This on-court war against Clark is not a separate issue from the CBA negotiations, it's a key piece of the players' argument. Every time Clark gets hit with a hard foul that goes unpunished, it becomes a visual metaphor for the league's alleged disregard for its most valuable assets. It reinforces the players' narrative that the league leadership doesn't value us. The physical battle on the court is being used as evidence in the corporate battle off of it. Simultaneously, her name is being weaponized by both sides in their public relations war. The Players Association, led by Nafisa Collier, constantly points to Clark as the ultimate example of the league's exploitative system. Collier has publicly called it insane and said it should be illegal that a player generating hundreds of millions of dollars for the league is paid a salary of less than $80,000. Meanwhile, according to Collier, the league is using Clark's success against her. The commissioner's alleged comment about Clark's $16 million in endorsement deals is a way of saying the league doesn't need to pay her more because she's already rich. Caitlin Clark is trapped in an impossible position. Her success created the conflict. Her low league salary is the players' rallying cry. Her high endorsement income is the league's alleged counter-argument. The physical beating she takes on the court is a symbol of the players' struggle for respect. She is the most important person in the WNBA, but she has the least amount of power in a war that will decide the fate of her career. And while this internal war was raging, a massive external crisis was brewing, one that would distract the only person who might have the power to stop it. Just as the WNBA was spiraling into chaos, its parent organization, the NBA, was hit with a bombshell. A sprawling federal investigation into illegal gambling was unsealed, and the details were straight out of a mob movie. This wasn't a minor infraction, this was a massive corruption scandal that threatened the very integrity of the sport. The investigation involved active NBA players like Terry Rozier, a head coach in Chauncey Billups, and according to federal prosecutors, direct ties to 3 of New York's infamous mafia families. The feds called it one of the most brazen sports corruption schemes since sports betting was legalized. This scandal landed directly on the desk of NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, the ultimate authority over both the NBA and the WNBA. For years, Silver had been a champion of legalized sports betting, arguing it would bring the industry out of the shadows. Now he was facing a 5-alarm fire that could permanently damage the NBA's multi-billion-dollar brand. He was dealing with federal law enforcement, mafia allegations, and a crisis of public trust. From a purely corporate perspective, this became a simple matter of triage. The NBA is a global behemoth that generates around $10 billion in annual revenue. The WNBA, even with its recent growth, brings in about $200 million. A federal corruption scandal involving the mafia is an existential threat to the main business. A labor dispute in the WNBA, while serious, is a fire in a side building. Adam Silver's attention, his resources, and all of his political capital were immediately diverted to containing the much larger and more dangerous inferno in the NBA. This created a power vacuum, and the WNBA Players Association saw a strategic opportunity. They knew the commissioner was distracted. They knew the NBA would be desperate to avoid another protracted negative news cycle while it was already under a federal microscope. This was a moment of perceived weakness for the league's leadership, so they decided to push harder, to turn up the pressure, gambling that the league would rather pay them what they wanted than fight a messy public war on two fronts. It was a high-risk, high-reward strategy. They were leveraging the chaos of the NBA's crisis to their advantage, pushing the WNBA ever closer to a deadline with no deal in sight, and leaving the league, the players, and the fans with only three possible roads forward, all of them leading toward disaster. With the deadline looming and no agreement in sight, the future of the WNBA came down to three distinct possibilities. Each one carried its own set of risks, ranging from temporary chaos to total catastrophe. The first and most hopeful path was a simple extension. The league officially offered the players a 30-day extension on the current contract. This would have been a temporary ceasefire, allowing negotiations to continue behind closed doors, while the business of the league, like the crucial expansion draft for the new teams in Toronto and Portland, could move forward. In the past, extensions were common, but extensions only work when both sides are negotiating in good faith and genuinely believe a deal is within reach. Given the public accusations of lying and the deep personal animosity between the leadership, that trust was gone. The Players Association publicly stated that the circumstances do not yet exist for them to agree to an extension, effectively rejecting the league's olive branch. That led to the second path, a state of limbo. If the deadline passed with no extension and no new deal, the league would enter a bizarre status quo period. The old contract would be expired, but no one would officially be on strike or locked out. It would be a state of suspended animation. But this path was just as dangerous. All league business would grind to a halt. Free agency would be frozen. The expansion draft would be postponed indefinitely. The WNBA draft, with its next class of stars, would be up in the air. This uncertainty would paralyze the entire league, creating a slow bleed of momentum, as players, teams, and fans were left to wonder if there would even be a season to prepare for. This brought everyone to the brink of the third and final path, the nuclear option, a full-blown work stoppage. This could happen in one of two ways. The owners could initiate a lockout, literally locking the players out of all team facilities and shutting down all league operations. Or, the players could go on strike, refusing to play until their demands were met. Either way, the result would be the same. The 2026 season would be in jeopardy. A work stoppage would be an act of self-destruction on an unprecedented scale. The WNBA was in the middle of a fragile, once-in-a-generation boom. The millions of casual fans who tuned in to watch Caitlin Clark do not have the decades of loyalty required to wait out a bitter labor dispute. They would simply change the channel and move on. A canceled or even delayed season wouldn't just stop the league's momentum, it would reverse it, sending the WNBA spiraling backward and proving to investors, sponsors, and media partners that its incredible growth was just a flash in the pan. What we are witnessing is a perfect storm. A fundamental philosophical disagreement over the league's economic future has collided with the rise of a powerful, rival league run by the very players leading the negotiations. This corporate conflict has been poisoned by a toxic personal feud between the players' most powerful representative and the league's commissioner. At the center of it all is a generational superstar whose historic success is being used as a weapon by all sides. And overseeing this internal collapse is a distracted parent organization consumed by its own massive federal corruption scandal. The central irony is almost too painful to comprehend. For 25 long years, the WNBA fought and clawed for this exact moment of mainstream relevance and financial success. They dreamed of sold-out arenas, primetime television slots, and a superstar who could transcend the sport. They got everything they ever wanted. And now, the very success they achieved has created a conflict so bitter, so personal, and so intense that it threatens to tear the entire league apart. The battle over how to divide their new golden empire may end up leaving nothing but rubble. And so, as the clock ticks down, the entire future of women's professional basketball hangs in the balance, resting on one final unsettling question. Is this a necessary and painful revolution that will ultimately forge a stronger, more equitable league for generations to come? Or is this just a tragic, avoidable story of greed and ego, where a league, at its absolute moment of greatest triumph, chose to destroy itself?